Chapter 8 Downtime on the Road. If you drive over the road, or OTR, also known as long-haul trucking, you'll soon realize that a truck can't move all the time. Solo and team operations alike have to shut down every now and then if they're running hard enough, or there isn't any freight moving. After driving 11 hours, you're required by law to take a 10-hour break. If you're a team driver, you go to bed and your co-driver takes over and moves on down the road. But if you're a solo driver, you've got 10 hours to kill. It's also inevitable that there will be times when there just isn't any freight moving in the area you're in.
So how do you pass all that time?
If it's just your mandatory 10-hour break, you'll have enough time to take a shower, grab some grub, and still get however much sleep you need before it's time to get moving again. However, if it's an extended downtime, you need to figure out how to occupy yourself. If the company needs you to stand by in case a load pops up, then you can hang out in your truck, watch TV, play video games, read, catch up on paperwork, or clean the truck. If you've got a laptop computer, you can even surf the web via Wi-Fi, that's wireless internet, at most major truck stops now, for an hourly, daily, monthly, or annual fee, of course.
Even if you aren't near a Wi-Fi signal, most smartphones nowadays will allow tethering, meaning you can get on the internet on your laptop through your phone's data service. What if I can't stand the look of the inside of my truck no more?
Good point. Trust me, this will definitely happen to you. Your company may ask you to stand by so you're available for a load. If you've got a cell phone, and who doesn't nowadays, you can at least get out of the truck and take a walk, go into the truck stop and play some video games, eat, get online, watch TV, or sit around and shoot the poop with the other drivers. There is always some driver willing to talk your leg off. It's a wonder you don't see more one-legged truckers. Let me warn you, though, Congress should pass a law that requires a big red warning label to be stamped across most truck drivers' foreheads that reads, "Once started, won't shut up." Of course, that'll never happen because Congress can't agree on anything. They'd probably argue over the wording of the phrase for a couple of decades. You can't really blame truckers, though. Most of us are all alone out here on the road for weeks on end. When we start talking, it tends to spew out of us like last night's tequila. I'm guilty of that myself, both the talking and last night's tequila.
When I start talking too much in a social situation, the evil overlord has a certain wide-eyed look she gives me that tells me to back the heck off. Thankfully, I'm not seeing it as much as I used to. And a word to the wise here.
Don't ever drink a large glass of milk the morning after a tequila binge. You'll never look at cottage cheese the same. Man, I'm glad those reckless drinking binges are in the past. Anyway, don't say you haven't been warned about talkative truckers. Engage in trucker conversation only if you've got a decade or two to burn. Under certain circumstances, your company may tell you outright that you won't be getting the load right away. Sometimes this can be a good thing. If it's Friday and you've been told that your next load doesn't pick up until Monday morning, your company might approve you to go get a hotel for a couple of days. Sometimes they'll even foot the bill, providing that you aren't staying at the Four Seasons and you're being shut down is beyond your control. If you are shut down due to circumstances beyond your control, such as lack of freight, some companies pay what is called layover pay. Layover pay isn't much, but it's better than nothing. Simply saying you need a break from the truck doesn't qualify for layover pay. Sorry. You might also have downtime if your truck breaks down. One 4th of July holiday, the air conditioning went out on our truck. Thank God we were in Salt Lake City instead of Phoenix at the time. Still, it was too hot to drive, let alone sleep in the truck. We weren't very happy when we found out that due to the holiday, the dealer couldn't get the parts needed to fix it. When the part finally got there, it was the wrong part and had to be reordered. To make a long story short, we were shut down away from home for 5 days.
Does that happen often?
No, but every now and then it might. As it turned out, that breakdown wasn't all that bad. The company paid us breakdown pay of $30 each per day. Breakdown pay is similar to layover pay, except that you're paid if your truck is broke down instead of not having any freight. Because our truck was uninhabitable without air conditioning, they also paid for a decent hotel room. We made the most of this breakdown by renting a car, eating in unique restaurants, and visiting the zoo and the aquarium, where we got to touch a stingray. Those suckers are slick as snot on a doorknob. You know, that's a really gross saying. Thanks to Mom and Dad for passing down all those wonderful little knowledge nuggets. By the way, if you run into my mom, be sure to ask her what the heck slaunchwise means. Where was I? Yes. Sure, instead of spending money sightseeing and eating out, we could have made a lot of money that week had our truck been operational. But it wasn't. Instead, we made the best of a bad situation. In short, we got an unplanned vacation with some of our expenses paid. Hey, it could have been worse. Murphy's Law states that trucks are usually only allowed to break down in Podunk, Kansas. Rarely are you lucky enough to run out of driving hours or break down in Las Vegas. Come on, you know Murphy's not that nice, the heartless scuzzbucket. Even if you aren't getting layover or breakdown pay, you can sometimes still get approval to leave the truck in a hotel parking lot, pay for a room, and even rent a car and explore the area. This usually gets approved when you've been running really hard or you get too sick to drive and need a break from the truck. Now, running really hard usually involves long periods of time out on the road, not just having to drive a whole 11-hour shift without stopping, you big wimp. Being shut down while you're away from home stinks. But if you're a solo driver, it reeks worse than a skunk that's been sprayed by another skunk. Being alone is a luxury to many people with normal jobs, especially if you're around a whole mess of people every day. Solo truckers aren't, so it sucks. Sightseeing just isn't a whole lot of fun when you have to do it alone. If I hadn't had the evil overlord with me when our truck broke down in Salt Lake City, I undoubtedly would have been bored to tears. Instead of eating meals at intriguing restaurants and touching slimy little stingrays, I probably would have gotten pizza delivered and clicked the remote control for 5 days. Sure, it would have been a heck of a lot cheaper, but where's the fun in that? Herein lies another problem with downtime. You spend money instead of earn it. It's one thing to sacrifice your home time to be out on the road making money. Unfortunately, when you have downtime, you're heading in the wrong financial direction. Not only are you not making money, most of the time you're spending it on something to occupy your time. And you can bet your evil overlord won't be happy when she finds out you dumped your paycheck into a video game in the trucker's lounge. This is why you need to find a hobby that you can do in or around your truck. It's simply not practical to rent a car and go sightseeing every time you aren't moving for a few hours. So what did I do to kill the time? Until recently, my hobby of choice was video gaming. Not the kind you dump quarters into in the trucker's lounge. The PlayStation kind. But there's something you'll need before you can do this. In order to run all your electronic toys, you'll need to have one of the following power sources. 1. An APU or auxiliary power unit. This is basically a generator that is attached to the truck. More information on that in Chapter 11. Either your truck will have an APU installed, or it won't. Some companies use them, some don't. If you don't want to forget to ask, you know what book will help you remember that. If you've got an APU, you'll have traditional AC wall-type electrical plug-ins in the cab of the truck. Problem solved. If not, you'll need, number 2, an inverter. What? An inverter is a device that transforms DC, auto electricity, into AC, home electricity, effectively letting you plug in electrical stuff that doesn't have a cigarette lighter plug on it, i.e. a game system, microwave, TV, laptop computer, or anything else your little heart desires. To figure out how big of an inverter you're going to need, just check the wattage requirements on the back of the devices you want to power simultaneously. Add up the wattages and buy an inverter large enough to power them. For example, if your TV uses 80 watts and your game system needs 75 watts, in theory you'll need an inverter big enough to handle 155 watts. Now here's a lesson I learned the hard way. Most electrical devices have a startup power requirement that is above its listed wattage, so make sure you buy an inverter slightly larger than what you think you'll need. If you'll only be using it to power small devices like a small TV or laptop computer, you may get by with a 300-watt inverter or less that'll plug into your cigarette lighter. This will set you back $30 to $35. For bigger appliances like a microwave, you'll need an inverter that's 600 watts or more,
depending on the wattage of your microwave.
This monster will cost $60 or more and will need to be wired directly to your batteries. The biggest inverter readily available is 3000 watts, which is about $200. You'll only need that much power if your wife plans on blow drying her hair while she's microwaving a frozen dinner, all while you're playing video games on your TV. I tell you, those hair dryers need buku power. Yes, I speak from experience.
Most companies don't have a problem with installing inverters that need to be wired to the batteries, but others don't allow any kind of inverters, even the cigarette lighter plug-in type.
Of the companies that allow inverters, some will have a wattage limit. Most will also require it to be professionally installed by them or someone other than your neighbor's kid.
Heck, a lot of companies are ordering them pre-installed at the factory now. Sweet!
It's just one more thing you're going to have to remember to ask a prospective employer when you're job hunting. Of course, if you have the handy-dandy checklist and how to find a great truck driving job, you won't have to worry about forgetting to ask, now will you? And of course, there's a link to that much-needed book in the text version and in the appendix. Okay, now back to my beloved hobby. If you really want to be tight, you can pick up a used PlayStation or an Xbox and some used games. Video games are a great way to waste time. I can play PS2 for 15 hours straight. I know, I've done it. Remember the 2 days we were shut down in Reno due to the snow on Donner Pass? Bingo. 2 days of PS2. One of them for 15 hours straight. Sure, 15 hours of not blinking will make your eyes so bloodshot that you look like you just walked out of a Pink Floyd concert, but it's a great way to burn time.
Heck, I've even got friends that are jealous of my PlayStation time.
It seems that playing video games for hours at a time is a luxury when you have kids. There's reason number 2 for being an uncle instead of a dad. Man, but I'm selfish. Grinning, but selfish. Another thing video games did was help me to reduce stress. Don't get me wrong, I got extremely frustrated at my games now and then. Enough so that I wanted to throw my controller out the window. Just try playing God of War on God mode. You'll see what I mean.
I can't tell you how many times I woke up the evil overlord because I was strangling my controller by violently shaking it. It's funny. Now. What I found was that if I was playing a video game, I wasn't so cheesed that it was taking 4 hours to get my trailer loaded. The load won't be ready for 6 hours? No problem. I still haven't collected all the titanium bolts in Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. These are some of my favorite games. Link in the text version.
It's a fact. In trucking, there will always be times when you aren't making any money due to circumstances beyond your control. Why would you get your blood pressure boiling about it? Instead, take out your frustration by turning some enemies into ducks with a blast from your Quacko Ray gun.
Although I sometimes miss my video games, I don't get to play them much anymore. Instead, now I'm spending every spare moment in my truck writing this book or producing the Trucker Dump podcast. So there's another idea for a hobby. It's been said that everyone thinks they can write a book. If you're one of those people, you might as well use your downtime to find out. I'm doing it. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anybody will read your fine piece of literature, but you're reading mine, or listening in this case. So take a walk, read, surf the web, bite your toenails. I've seen ladies doing needlepoint. Some guys love to shine their trucks. Crazy fools. To each his own, but find a hobby that works for you or you'll be as bored as an ADD sufferer watching golf on TV. There's one more thing about being alone on the road. You don't necessarily have to be. One way to combat loneliness is what's called a rider policy. A rider policy allows you to bring another person along for the ride. That means you can bring your spouse with you if they don't want to sit at home alone. As for me, being just a passenger for weeks at a time sounds like my own personal vision of hell. But if that's what floats your boat. Depending on each company's policy, your rider could stay out with you permanently or just go out with you every once in a while. Some companies will even let kids ride along with mom or dad if they meet a minimum age requirement, usually around 12 years old. This is quite popular during the summer months when there's no school. There's usually a small cost, usually around 15 or 20 bucks a month, and some insurance paperwork involved, but a rider policy is a great way to break up the monotony of being alone all the time. That is, if you're wily enough to convince some unsuspecting sap that it'll be fun. Another popular way to avoid loneliness is to bring along a pet, if your company allows them. Again, each company has their own pet policy. Some companies don't allow any pets in the truck, but the majority of the large companies do. Of those that allow pets, their pet policy might limit the number of animals you can bring, the size of an animal, and/or the type of animal. That latter restriction is to deter drivers from bringing snakes, lizards, ferrets, birds, etc. Don't laugh, it happens. The worst pet situation we ever witnessed was a trucker who got out of his truck with his wife, a newborn baby, and 3 full-grown German Shepherds. Granted, this guy owned his own truck. A company driver would rarely be allowed to have 3 animals that big, and they would never allow a newborn baby. Most carriers will limit you to dogs or cats. Although I've seen some monster cats, the size restriction usually pertains to dogs. I went to driving school with a guy who had an Alaskan Malamute. That dog weighed dang near 150 pounds. This limited his driving prospects because only a handful of companies would let him take an animal that big. It simply didn't matter to him. He refused to go without that mutt. He ended up taking a job with a not-so-great company for considerably less money than the rest of us. But he found a driving job, and he took that dog. Having an animal in the truck naturally requires some extra work. You've got to stop and let a dog out to take care of business. Although, after talking to some shop guys and mechanics, we found out not every driver did so. They told us numerous stories about finding big piles of animal dookie lying everywhere inside the truck. Gross. This goes back to what I was saying about taking some responsibility and taking care of your truck. Don't be that dog poop guy. The shop guys will hate your guts. Having a cat will require you to have a litter box in the truck, unless, of course, you can train a cat to walk on a leash and poop while everyone's watching. Cats get annoyed when you watch them poop. We used to do it to our cat Rudy, just to bug him. He hated it. I wish you good luck with that. As for putting a leash on a cat, I think of a black cat we used to have who went by the name Damage. Man, that cat was destructive. I named him after the Metallica song Damage Incorporated. Anyway, the evil overlord once tried to train him to walk on a leash. He'd simply fall over on his side and refuse to stand up. The best we could manage was to drag him along the ground. As I said, good luck with that. Other than the inconvenience factor of caring for an animal, the worst thing about taking a pet with you is the cost. Expect to pay a considerable deposit for having an animal in the truck. Sometimes that deposit is even non-refundable, which is a big deal when the deposit can be $250, $500, or even higher. Sometimes that deposit is per animal. Ouch. Companies do this because having an animal in the truck puts a lot of extra wear and tear on a truck's interior. Also, since most animals shed, it involves extra maintenance such as cleaning out the air filters more often. The bottom line is that if you want your pet to be with you, be prepared to pay for the privilege. Don't like your pet enough to fork over $500? Leave it at home then. Speaking of home, let's discuss a very important issue to all truck drivers: home time.